Hello, so today we're going to be talking about painting skin tones. And as I get started, I just want to say to you that there's never just one way to paint skin tones. There are so many different ways to handle them, and there have been some really fascinating things. We've got alizarin crimson, and this is a hue, which means that it's like a slightly cheaper version. And let's throw in a little bit of ultramarine and a teeny bit of our azo yellow, or just whatever yellow we have. So we're just working with the primaries for just a second. When I first was learning about mixing skin tones, it was at a time when, believe it or not, there was still a tube of paint called skin tone, right? Which absolutely favored this kind of idea that, well, for one thing, everyone was kind of a weird peach color, but being serious about that, right? Like it really, I think, spoke to the fact that there was a very strong idea that it was really just white individuals who were going to be being depicted in paintings. And then as we look back through the history of painting, right, that sets up certain ideas about beauty and value. So the first thing I'm going to do is just think about trying out some different kinds of skin tones. So I'm going to make something that's really kind of ruddy looking at first, right? This is crazy red-orange color. I'm going to go ahead and steal in a little bit more yellow, and I didn't do that the right way because I contaminated it. So from there, I think that skin tones are really about making neutrals. And not only are they about making neutrals, but they're about looking carefully at the skin of whomever you want to paint. You do not have to handle paint with realistic skin with realistic skin tones. I think it can be really interesting not to do that. Okay, so here we go. Making something that looks very, very peachy. And an important thing that I want you to remember is that at different points throughout this demo, we're gonna come up with things where you think, oh, you know, that would be a good skin tone, but it just depends really on the other colors that you're using in the composition. If I have a lot of blues, this is gonna appear as like a screaming kind of orangey color. Whereas if I have a lot of other warm colors in the composition, maybe we wouldn't feel that way. But right away I know, okay, that's just still like, I need to go ahead and neutralize this just a little bit more. Okay, and at first you're like, oh no, we killed it. But I actually think we just built a kind of beautiful, maybe a little bit blue, kind of olivey based skin tone right there. Lovely. So I want to take just a little bit of this and just give it like, whoop. We can tell, oh my gosh, Anne, you didn't mix all that well. Sorry, a little blue intruder there. But we can see that that might function. And then we can try to see, okay, how would that act if we add a little bit more of the white for a lighter tone. Gosh. And then really just making sure to wipe off my palette knife. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more blue down here. And really be sure to mix, because we already saw that happen where I had a little piece of it fall off on my palette. Not well mixed. It might be because I think my palette knife is a touch dirty. It's not a great example. So that's taking it just a little bit more to the blue. Let's try adding in just a little bit more red. So that. Okay, lovely. So it's crazy to me because this is also how I was like, go ahead and make black or make a neutral color, right? Like there's skin tones tucked right inside of there, depending on whose skin we're painting. Let's go ahead and make a little bit of a darker version of this. So I'm starting dominantly with a lot more blue and a lot more red. So I'm gonna end up with a real deep purple at first, a kind of wild purple. It's really beautiful. Once you start looking at people, you're going to see that there's all sorts of beautiful color in the body. There's pinks, there's greens, there's blues, there's purples, just depending on who you're looking at and where you're looking. Or veins, you know, like I'm very kind of have some like kind of modeling to that, but you know, it's fascinating. All right, so we're going to come up and steal a little bit of our yellow, really mix that so that it can become nice and neutral. And to my eye, we're getting there, but that's still pretty strong in the family of purple, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a little more. What that looks like laid down. Oh, lovely. Okay. So let's try adding just a tiny bit of white to that and see where that gets us. Right away, that I feel like that changes our color quite a bit, but it just depends on what kind of a skin tone we're hoping to make. Add maybe a little bit more to see how we can change the color. That was too much red. All right, let's see what we can do with it. Right, everybody has different kinds of like color undertones. Some people are a little bit more yellow or orange or pink. Some of us are a little bit more ruddy, so pinks and reds. Some people actually have a little bit of like violet or green or kind of a blue undertone. Just looking carefully. So this is coming out much more in the blush family, which might be interesting for a cheek or a lip or something like that, but in keeping with these kind of colors, something like that. But let's see. So I just love to kind of experiment as I go and create little palettes for myself and try to figure out how I feel like they work together. Yeah, I think I like that better with a little bit more yellow in it. I also want to show you, I'm going to do a quick palette switch right here, some of my other kind of favorites that are not necessarily in your paint set yet. We're going to try just a drop of burnt sienna to see what we think about that. Starting from an already very neutral base. And we'll put in still a little bit of yellow. A little bit of blue. And this time I'm going to use a naphtha red, or excuse me, crimson, just to sort of see That's a little bit of a hotter red. So we'll see what we think. It's also less transparent. So watercolorists, you're probably like, well, like, how do I approach this? I would use a very similar kind of approach. The only thing is that instead of adding a white to my watercolor, I would very likely just go ahead and use the white of the paper to shine through. All right, so let's just take a look at this. Adding just a little bit of white. That was more white than I had intended to do. Okay, so this is almost like a completely kind of perfect gray. And so I can build up off of that, adding a little bit of red. And so far you're like, who's this color? Probably no one right now. This is such a pretty warm gray. Let's go ahead and we're gonna add a significant chunk of yellow in there. Alright, it's starting to get just a tiny bit more lively, but again, that's like, I don't know, the color of an unfortunate office somewhere. So I'm gonna pull in just a little bit more red. All right, again, and it depends on the colors that I have in my palette, but I'm starting to like this a little bit more as something that could be in a skin toned family. Let's see here. I'm gonna try taking some of it and adding just a little bit more of the white down here. And it still feels like too. This is a little bit, I think I'm making my corpse palette right now. Let's add a little bit more. It's dark. Yellow. And you'll notice that going from this perspective, it's almost like I'm livening up that neutral rather than going from the other perspective where I was really trying to dim it down. So let's add just a teeny bit of blue on this side and see what happens with that. Well, I can tell you what happened with that. We put too much blue in. It happens to everybody. But this is why I do these tests before I'm like actually stroking paint onto the canvas, because I have in the past turned people kind of an ashy blue-green, which can be awesome looking, but you really want to know where you're going paint-wise before you're on the canvas. Ooh, I'm really loving that. Such a nice color for like a shadow. So by now you're starting to realize, okay, there's no one formula that I feel like we can rely on using. It's about looking at the person that you're wanting to depict or envisioning the kind of individual you'd like to depict and then trying to build a palette from there. That feels too like, I don't know, I feel like that needs a little bit more yellow in order to feel lively. interesting how just making a change can all of a sudden feel like it's just so glaring. Might be a kind of beautiful spot for like some sort of a highlight, or maybe that's just the basis of another palette that you would use. Okay. That does to me feel like something that would be in sunlight, and probably, like, I think compared to those, it does feel really yellow. But let's go ahead and let's try just a little bit of this one. So lovely. Oh my goodness. Well, you poor things. Okay, this is really funny. All right, there we go. Oh, burnt sienna, a little bit of light, a little bit more, a little bit more. We could take a little bit of these and try mixing them together. Maybe create something. Ooh, that's beautiful. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and pull a little bit of that in there. Sorry, I just keep going up, but you can see it. Okay. I love that color. Okay. Really interesting. All right. Just throwing in a little bit of yellow. So ultimately, when you find kind of the right grouping of colors that you want to use in your portrait, I want you to think about recording those, writing them down, like noting what you've used. And then we're going to talk about some ways that you can save your palette if you need to. Okay, wonderful.